Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another Victorious Friday, a podcast about parenting for parents. Today, as I have a very special guest, as I always say, but let me ask you this question. As a parent, does it feel like you are at war with your children? Maybe even war with yourself? Well, today's guest, we're going to talk about his new book called The Battle. My guess, I tell you, I think about this guy, I get chill bumps, right? Because when I think about my guest, David, he's going to be sharing lessons. He called them tactics. I love it. I love it when he says tactics for biblical manhood. Learn from his serving in Vietnam. What a powerful story in his new book, The Battle. David, welcome to the show, my friend.
Hello, brother. Thanks for having me. I got to clarify right out of the gate. I ain't old enough to have been in Vietnam. I just am part of the family of the guys that fought in Vietnam. I was born a month after the battle that the book is about took place. So I'm not quite Vietnam old, but I know all about their families and the guys that fought there. And that was really what propagated the book, was spending a lot of time with them at their reunions every year and hearing their stories, not just as soldiers, but as dads, as husbands, as grandfathers. And it was just so powerful to see the parallels between real world combat and spiritual warfare against the enemy that the Bible says wants to steal, kill, and destroy. So that's kind of the Reader's Digest of how the book got written.
Man, that's fantastic. Well, David, tell us a little bit. Let's start out and tell us a little bit about you and your family and just your marriage. And so just give us a little update and background on yourself.
Well, I am one of the 40 some odd percent of the guys that you'll meet serving in the church and ministry that divorced, remarried, met the Lord as a result of a marriage melting down, got a second opportunity to really be a godly husband, because I had no idea what that meant on the first pass. And I have 5 kids, 28, 27, 26, 25, and 23. We got 2 girls. They were the oldest, and we have 3 boys. 3 out of the 5 are married. And for the viewers that are raising special needs kids, we have a 25-year-old high-functioning special needs son who is at home probably for the foreseeable future, unless God does something miraculous. I think we will never truly be empty nesters. And I know that there are probably some viewers of your podcast that might be in a similar circumstance. So when you bring up battle, that's a battle in and of itself. Met the Lord, as I said, as a result of losing everything: wife, kids, house, had a car and the stuff in the trunk, and met the Lord, live in Florida, met the Lord at the top of the Sunshine Skyway Bridge. As I was coming down the other side, I had cried out to God that if you're there, I need to know. And every hair on my arm stood up. I was baptized in the Gulf of Mexico shortly thereafter, and in ministry a few short years later, and haven't looked back since. God is good. He pulled me out of a pit and sent me to work.
Oh, man, I tell you, that's good. Well, brother, I want to jump right into it because I've been enjoying this new book, and thanks for my copy. I'm protecting it. And, The Battle, I mean, tactics for biblical manhood, learn from the 7th Calvary in Vietnam. And I mean, man, what a powerful foreword as well by William Boykin. Give us a setup, man. Tell us a little bit about it. And then I'm going to be jumping in and just different places that stood out to me. But I'm sure you have your favorites as well. But just give me a overall summary, if you will, of the message and how and why did you write this book? What led you to put pen to paper?
Well, first, I mean, I'll answer the questions in reverse. First, I mean, the primary reason why I wrote it first is I'm a movie freak. I love movies, and We Were Soldiers is one of my favorites. And there is a movie done by Randall Wallace. It stars Mel Gibson and Sam Elliott and a bunch of other guys, where they actually portrayed this 3-day battle that occurred in Vietnam. And that's really what propagated the whole thing. As I was watching the movie, and I thought, man, what a great way to illustrate principles to biblical manhood, to use spiritual warfare, because I think we discount the fact that the Bible does say we have an enemy that wants to steal, kill, and destroy. Peter says he prowls around like a roaring lion. And this enemy of our souls has figured out that if you take the man out of a family, you take the man out of the marriage, the family, you end up losing the marriage, you lose whatever ministry or work-related church life this particular family had, you lose the kids, And oftentimes you lose the generational legacy that comes after the man, which means that it's kind of a one-shot multiple kill scenario where the enemy's figured out, if I can take this guy out of this marriage, then I can wreck everything. And it's been my passion since 2007 when we started the ministry, to let men know, man, you're on point. You are the overseer of your family. You lead courageously. You love sacrificially. You don't dominate. And so as I was engulfed in this movie, God told me very clearly to reach out to Joe Galloway, who's played by Barry Pepper in the movie. He was a UPI reporter that was embedded with this 395 member battalion in Vietnam in 1965. And I thought, there is no way I'm ever going to get a hold of this guy. I mean, he's a man crush. How am I going to get a hold of a guy who I just, put up on a pedestal? But I sent an email to his agent, and the next thing you know, I'm having barbecue up in North Carolina with this guy. And long story tolerable is I was invited to the reunion through one of the West Point graduate guys that were company commander. And suddenly, in 2013, I'm surrounded by every guy that's portrayed in this movie. And so my wife and I have just table jumped. Every year we go to the reunion, and I've learned about their marriages and their kids and their grandkids. And as I mentioned, I learned one very specific thing is every tactic that these guys used to defeat an enemy when they were outnumbered 5-1 against an enemy that they couldn't see, had never fought before, and knew nothing about, those same tactics will work against this enemy that wants to take the man out of the family. And so I took a series of different principles, which I call tactics, to how to succeed against this enemy day in and day out, so that the enemy doesn't get a foothold and take out our marriages and our families.
Well, that's so good. I mean, when I think about this too, how critical it is right now, because when we look at the family, I think one of the crises that we're all facing today is around this fatherhood. And if you take out the father, man, you take out the core. And I think we're in that spiritual battle right now. I'm looking at parents, I'm looking at families today, and I'm seeing the absenteeism of the father. And sometimes the father is physically there, but it's not emotionally there. It's not, spiritually there, et cetera, right? And I look around the church and I see women primarily in the pews, and I always ask, where are the dads, right? What's the role of the father? And I can tell you that when the father began to engage, and as you call them, these tactics, I mean, I'm going to get into that in a minute. I love this piece. When the fathers begin to engage, it's something that happens. I can't quite explain it. I mean, the Bible speaks to it, but something magical happens in the family, especially in spiritual basis. Man, let's talk about these tactics that you learned from these Vietnam vets. I mean, just jump in, man, and share maybe a few of them. Well, these tactics, techniques, and procedures.
Do myself a favor and grab a copy of the book, because there's so much in it that I don't want to lose track of myself. But honestly, the way that
give us some good stuff, man.
The way that it started, and I'll lean specifically towards fatherhood. But obviously you need to be acutely aware that we're in a battlefield. And not only are we in a battlefield, but as I mentioned, we men are the target, because the enemy has figured out that if you take out the man, you can ruin the whole family. So that's the first few chapters. And then understanding truly that we are not home. When we make a profession of faith in Jesus Christ, we essentially supernaturally surrender our birth certificate here on earth, and we become eternal citizens of heaven. Jesus even prayed over his disciples in John 17, said, I'm praying that you don't take them out of the world, but that you protect them from the evil one. And then he said, they are not of the world, even as I am not of it. So he clearly states that we're aliens here. We don't belong here. And to understand the textbook definition of a deployment, which is heading into combat, you're a citizen of another country, and you deploy to a foreign land, and you fight on that land until the mission is over and you return home. For us as believers, that means every morning when we walk out the front door of our house, that's not our home. That's a forward operating base on hostile ground. The enemy is here. We're citizens of heaven. And if you don't believe that, just look around at the culture today and you'll see that the enemy, the God of this world with the lowercase g, like Paul talks about, has taken over. So needing to understand that we're in a war, that we're on a deployment, that we're on enemy ground. And then, of course, it transitions to our need as men for not a massive small group, but 2 or 3 guys that we can lean on. David had Jonathan, for example. Moses was standing at the top of a mountain while Joshua was fighting the Amalekites on a valley floor. And all he had to do was keep his arms outstretched. And he couldn't even do that after the amount of time. And as soon as his arms started to drop, Joshua would lose ground. And Aaron came up to one side, Hur came up to the other side. These 2 dudes held his arms up the entire time. And the victory that Joshua got on the battlefield is not just because of Moses, but because of Moses, Aaron, and Hur. Anybody that's going to be victorious in life as a brother in Christ and as a father and as a husband, you need a core group of guys around you, not the guys that are going to be preaching at you, not the guys that you're going to read through Wild at Heart or the book, The Battle, and break it down a chapter at a time. I'm talking about guys that will support us, encourage us, and hold us accountable when necessary. Their whole mission is to make sure that our words and actions line up with who we say we are in Christ. And that, in the military context, would be a fire team. When you're in a fire team, there's 4 guys that jump into an armored vehicle. The gate opens, you're outside the wire, you're on enemy ground. Everywhere you turn, you could potentially be killed. And it's all about you and the 3 guys you're with. What's happening at the forward operating base, what's happening at home no longer matter, because when you're in a fight, it's just the brothers that you're with. And that's kind of a parallel that I draw. Then it just transcends into being resilient. Every one of the chapters has a story from one of the guys that was fighting on that battlefield back in 1965, letting the past go, bouncing back, being resilient. Those are all critically important. And then it really shifts gears and starts looking at he was a lieutenant colonel at the time, but ultimately retired as lieutenant general, Hal Moore, who was the commander. And he's got 5 kids too. And listening to the stories of his children and his grandkids, I realized that this guy's leadership was identical from battlefield to his own home. And so I put together one chapter specifically that I know you resonated with you, is having solid tactics, techniques, and procedures. TTPs is what they're called in the military, to ensure that you succeed as a husband and a father by putting down some pretty clear tactics that might be a paradigm shift for some guys that are watching the podcast, or it might be an aha moment where it's like, man, I never even thought of that before. I'm going to put that one into play. And if we can just see one family turned by a man stepping into his rightful spot as a spiritual leader who may have abdicated that, and mama's been leading the show, that's a huge win for the book and for the kingdom.
I like that. Target enemy resilience. And we do all of that because you mentioned in the book, maintaining your headquarters. I mean, that was the main, yeah, right? So you really focus. And so I want to jump into that, maintaining your headquarters, right? And chapter 13, session that you talked about it, developing solid TPP, you call it, right?
Yeah.
Let's talk about those tactics, techniques, and procedures. Give me a few of those in terms of tactics, techniques, procedures to maintain your headquarters.
Well, let me talk about the headquarters just really briefly. I mean, the headquarters in the context of this particular battle was actually a tent. And it was out in, I mean, we're talking about Vietnam. So the humidity, the heat, they were dealing with diseases and insects and all kinds of stuff that they'd never dealt with before. They were also obviously fighting an enemy that they'd never seen, that were experts in guerrilla tactics. But on every battlefield, now it's in a vehicle most of the time, but back then it was in a tent. Your headquarters tent was where everything was: your senior leadership, your medical, your communications, all your extra ammunition was all stored at the headquarters tent. And the goal was to defend your headquarters, because if you lose your headquarters, you've lost the battle. In the context of men like you and me, who aren't in Vietnam fighting a real enemy, we're fighting a spiritual enemy who's just as real. Our headquarters is our home. And if we don't have our home locked down, then the enemy can run rampant through the internet, through outside interference, through, especially when you have teenagers, all the outside influences that come in, and then they go off to college. And there's so much truth when you send kids off to college, if you haven't yet, where it says train up a child in the way that they should go, and when they grow old, they won't depart from it, because the seeds we plant inside our headquarters at home, that's what they're going to take out into the world. And that's when every other religion, every other lifestyle is going to come at them from every side when they hit that college campus on the first day. And if we don't prepare them right in the headquarters tent with the appropriate ammunition, radio communications, not just to us, but also to God, that they have a prayer life, all those things, then you can lose all that footwork that you did at the headquarters tent home before you send them out to war. The tactics, techniques, and procedures, I mean, there's so many of them, but they're so simple, and I think we forget. And I've listed them in objectives because it's just easier to follow along. I write in bullets, I write little paragraphs because I'm a guy, I don't like to read all that much. So I figured I'm going to write a book that I would read. So I write it in very succinct bullets. Objective 1, spend time. You've probably heard it said that kids spell love Time. If we're socked in on work and we're not having date nights, it's amazing how quickly the focus will shift and things will erode around us. And dad, we're it. Take that time to go throw a football. Even if you got 75 emails that you got to send, break away from it, because our legacy is our children, not our job. When we die, they're not going to be talking about us at work, but they will be talking about us around a Thanksgiving table. And it's critically important that our legacy remains intact at home. Be consistent with both love and discipline. I used to play my mom and dad off of each other all day long. I would ask my mom I'd ask my dad if I could go over to a friend's house, and he'd say, well, whatever your mom said. And then I'd go see my mom and I'd say, well, dad says it's okay if it's okay with you. And then somehow I managed to weasel my way through the system and always get what I wanted, because I would play one parent off of the other parent. And I see this in the store a lot. I grew up, in the South, and discipline with my dad, who's former military also, was one of go to the closet, grab a belt, or go out in the yard and grab a stick. That was just, I knew I was going to get my butt whooped at some point or another. But these days I hear people counting to 3, and then, it's like, you better get back in the shopping cart before I get to 3. And then they get to 3 and there's no follow-up. And so you can be really consistent in loving your kids, but if there's no framework of discipline, you can end up in a lot of trouble. And I touch on that. We don't dominate, but we have to be consistent. Discipline is out of love. No discipline, the Bible says in Hebrews, is pleasant at the time, but it's designed for correction and for rebuke and for making sure that we do the right thing. I'm a break, so I probably dropped a whole lot on you already, and you lead the charge. I'll answer anything you want. I got so much.
No, man, this is good, man. This is good. When I think about this, we talk about life experiences can teach us many things. With David Dusek, we're talking about those shared lessons, tactics, techniques, procedures that he learned from our Vietnam vets as they taught about maintaining the headquarters. And in this case, we're talking about the headquarters of our homes. And yep. David is already pointing out some real key tactics and techniques and procedures. David, I want you to continue, man, because our guys, I think they're especially men. We need to hear this. Because I think the ones that's been least consistent at home is probably us. But I always say we don't want to. At the end of the day, we all trying to do the right thing. We just want to do a better job and learn how to do it right. Yeah. One thing I know that men, we fear failure. Women, they fear criticism, but men, we fear failure. And so sometimes we don't try because we just don't want to fail. We don't want to fall short of it, right? Yeah. And but at the end of the day, we all fall short. We all are going to be challenged. And he says, we come in a humble way, right? We're learning every day, new tactics, new techniques, new procedures. But the one that never fails is what you just mentioned, man. We have to love well. Love well by giving that time, by giving that focus, by giving that energy every day. We can't fail with that, can we?
No.
Keep talking to me, man, on these tactics. Give me a couple more.
I'll speak into failure. One thing I am is transparent to a fault. And I have a child, he's not really a child now. He's closing in on 27, lives in Greenville, South Carolina, and he's had a rough run. My ex-wife died of cancer in 2009, and he was very young when that happened. So he's carrying with him the pain of divorce and the pain of losing his mom. And so he went pretty prodigal on me, and it kind of parachutes in and out of my life. And I do my best, and we text all the time. And I don't know who this is for that's listening to the podcast, but every morning I get up and I stare at my own worst enemy, which is me, looking back at me in the mirror, and I begin this dialogue of, I've failed as a dad. What could I have done differently? What did I do that makes my kid hate me so much that he won't send a text but once a month, and it's usually an inch deep and a mile wide? And that pain's real. When you talk about failure, no one is immune from that. I stand in front of thousands of people ministering to men about how to be godly husbands, and every morning I get up and I feel like an abject failure as a dad. And if it wasn't for my relationship with the Lord, I'd be looking elsewhere to temper my spirits, whether it's drinking or whatever, investing in sports, or fishing every day. And so what happens when we have the pain of failure, we look for some sort of a balm, so to speak, to put on it. And if we don't have Christ, we'll find it somewhere else. We'll become workaholics. We'll get so invested in our sports team that we follow them all over the country to watch them play. And the only people that suffer when that happens are the people that God has put us, our number one ministry, which is the one that we have at home. So it's a tactic, that failure is a tactic used by the enemy to discourage us, because whenever you hear those D words, depression, despondent, discouraged, we all know who it comes from. And it's not God. It comes from the father of lies, speaking his native tongue right into our ear every morning. So I just want to encourage the fathers that are on the podcast. We all feel that way. But it's a place we pass through. It's not a place that we live. We work through it. We have good days and bad. We have good days as husbands, and we have days where our ready, fire, aim mouth gets us into a world of trouble. But God's got this. I want to continue though, because I got some other stuff. Objective number 3, always pay attention to a balance of work and home. Now, if you're an accountant, it's January 3rd and you got April 15th coming up, you're going to be working 90 hours a week. That's just the way that it is. But at some point, we have to have some balance in our life. We can't say, I'm the provider. If I don't do it, nobody will. I have to be in work, because a lot of times work ends up being an escape from what's going on at home. I lived that season in my life where things weren't going well in my marriage. And so I just immersed myself in my job 90 to 100 hours a week, so I didn't have to deal with what was going on at home. And that's the quickest way to see a marriage disappear and our kids to perceive us as always working, which means that they're a lower priority than our job. So I just want to encourage the guys, make sure you're doing an inventory. And one of the ways to do that is to sit down with each one of your kids one at a time on the couch and ask them a couple of questions. Number one is, have I said anything in the last week that hurt you? And we say this to our wives too, and be ready, because you're going to hear stuff that you probably don't want to hear. Have I said anything that hurt you? And the second thing is, has there been a time recently where you needed my attention and I was otherwise busy? And if you start getting yeses on those things, then do an inventory. Was that busy really necessary, or was that busy because it's habit, or it's just something that your phone's blowing up for work emails, and so you start spending all your time putting out those fires while the kids are on the other side of the room going, hey, I'm over here. So that's what that particular objective is about, is to really do an inventory. And in order to do an inventory, you have to count each item that you have. And in this case, it's your wife and kids, and ask them the hard questions, because you're probably going to get even more difficult answers. But if we don't take some sort of a measure of our performance as a father and a husband, then we'll continue to erode away. So that's really the concept behind that one. Protect your marriage. Guys, we're on the same team. And we have to guard that marriage. You don't go to the office and talk to a woman in the cubicle next to you about how terrible your marriage is. You don't stand around at a water cooler and make jokes about your wife, and vice versa, because what God has put together, let no man put asunder. And so that includes us. So we have to protect that marriage. We have to guard it. We have to stay away from social media. Has become one of the leading causes of marital separation, because people are finding an old girlfriend from 25 years ago and talking to them online. And then the harmless lunch with quotation marks around it happens. And then the next thing you know, you're King David in 1 Samuel 11 with the Bathsheba thing going on, and the whole world falls apart. And that's exactly what the enemy will do, is say, hey man, you deserve this. She doesn't treat you right at home, and she's not speaking well of you. And then we get defensive and we get hurt. And it's amazing how quickly the enemy will stick his foot in the door. And I always say, if you let the enemy get a foot in the door, he will kick that thing down. So we have to be acutely aware that with our children, we are a unified team. We are a unified front at home. Outside of the home, our wives are everything. Put a picture of your wife on your smartphone. So whenever someone's looking over your shoulder, your wife is right there looking back. Talk highly of your marriage anywhere you are at any given point in time, and encourage your wife to do the same thing, because if the enemy can fracture the marriage, he can destroy the family. And it's our responsibility as men on point to make sure that our column of troops, so to speak, remains intact as we wander through the jungles of life with the enemy taking pot shots at us. Be a unified parental front, mentioned that already. Play my parents off of each other. We've got to be on one. It's one team, one fight at home. And no matter, you can't be your kid's best friend. I'm sorry, it doesn't work that way. If you're a single parent, it will not end well if we are besties with our kids and we're not leading our kids. It's cool to be both, but you can't go out and party with your kids and then have any level of respect as a parent. We have to be leaders. We have to be the source of discipline, and we have to be the wisdom to train them up so when they are outside of the house, they're fully equipped. Home is
David, I'm loving this because, again, guys, we're out here, we're talking with just an amazing guest here, David Dusek. He wrote an amazing book called The Battle. David, real quick, let me get a plug for this book.
Okay.
Where can I find, if I want to get a copy of this book, I'm a parent out there, I'm a dad out there, I'm listening. Where can I pick this book
Well,
up?
this is it. Bright yellow cover. It actually is a cavalry logo. So it actually matches the arm patch that was on the soldiers that fought in the battlefield. If you want a copy of it, you can get it everywhere. It's at Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Books A Million. If you want signed copies from me, they're on my website, which is roughcutmen.org. That also has my bio. I'm a speaker first and foremost. So I travel the world speaking to groups of men and preaching at churches on Sunday when the need arises. So we have a video series that we've created for men's small groups as well. Our website, roughcutmen.org, that's kind of where you find everything. And the book is in digital and in print, and the audio book is forthcoming. So it'll be in all different forms of media.
Man, that's good stuff. And I want to encourage our listeners to go and get a copy. In fact, I always encourage you to get 3 or 4 copies, because you want to give some of these copies away to your friends, your neighbors, etc. So one isn't enough. Just buy 3 or 4, sometime 10, and let's hand those out. David, as we wrap up, I want to give you the last word. I want you to look into that camera, and our audience are parents, their fathers, their grandparents, etc. And I'm listening to your tactics, your techniques, your procedures. Give us a final word to encourage particularly the dads out there who may be feeling discouraged. They may be feeling like they're falling short as a dad, but yet you and I know the victory's already been won. Give a word of encouragement to our dads out there in particular that will lift them up off the either the couch, the chair, the office seat, wherever they are. Let me just turn it over to you, and you close us out.
Parents, I know it's hard. Trust me, I know it's difficult, but on the backside of it, looking at 20-something-year-old kids that are married and raising their own kids, it is worth every single effort. Guys, it's exhausting. We're providing, we're loving. There are days when things just don't go well. There are days when jumping out of the marital airplane and pulling the ripcord seems like a good idea at the time, but you can also take it from someone who's lived the collateral damage of a marriage falling apart. It's not worth that either. So I'm going to challenge every guy. Remember your identity. You are a son of the Most High God. You are the apple of his eye. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. This battle may seem like it's overwhelming, but you're going to get through it. In the middle of some of these fights, sometimes the door looks better than sitting down on the couch and working through it. Take it from a guy who travels 120 days a year that found himself stuck at home for 365 days straight when COVID hit. All of a sudden, I could no longer walk around the elephant in my living room. I would go to the airport, did not deal with the stuff that was going on at home, knowing that by the time I got back, the dust would have settled. You can't walk around the elephant when you can't go to the airport. And my marriage has never been better because I sat down with my wife and we did the hard work. We talked about things that, frankly, I didn't want to hear because most of it was about me. But I promise you, if you just sit down and say, what can I do better? And listen, your marriage will never be better because what God puts you two together. And what God puts together, no outside influence, not even the enemy himself, can fracture unless we allow him to get in and take a hold of our marriages and our families. So you stand strong in Jesus Christ and know that his mission is that your marriage succeeds, that your job as a dad succeeds. He's on your side. And so am I. If you need me at all, my website has a contact page. And ministry is not about thousands. Ministry is about the one. Jesus left 99 to go after the one. I am here for any guy that ever wants to talk. If you're struggling and you have no friends or you don't trust anybody, I will be a listening ear. Reach out to me and I will pick you up off the battlefield and drag you off of it so you can live to fight another day.
David, I think that's a great place to end this. Let me encourage you again. This podcast has come from Victorious Family. Today is Victorious Friday, and we're talking about this battle that we're in as a parent. David, thank you so much, man. I'm so excited, thrilled to have you again. That book is called The Battle. Please go out and get your copies. And as we bring in family champions like David, who's bringing the truth, who's bringing it raw. David, I'm so thankful to have you on the show today, my friend.
Terence, what an honor, man. And thank you so much.
God bless you, man.
Thanks, bro.